Theresa Payton, welcome to Tailgating with Geniuses. We are thrilled to death to have you here with us.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this conversation. So let's see where it goes.
You're so kind. Look at Martin is literally chomping at the bit. Go, Martin, go. Ask.
Theresa. The three of us had a chat probably about 18 months ago, and then after we spoke, it was in February of 2023 that all of a sudden Bard or Bing actually included an AI function, and it kind of blew everyone away. And then before we knew it, here was OpenAI and ChatGPT was out. We've seen Anthropic with Claude and all of this stuff. So mind's blown. AI is everywhere. That's all anyone is talking. I was just at a material handling show, forklifts, and they were talking about AI. So, you can't swing a dead cat without AI. I dove in hard. There was a video that was out on YouTube from the Center on Humane Technology, and they did this thing called the AI Dilemma. And it was a discussion. It was a year ago, so I'm sure it's all over and gone by now. But what they said really had me jonesing to talk to you. They said, where we are with AI right now is that security as we know it is dead. And that the vault door basically protecting assets and secrets is now open. And I think they were speaking corporately, but also I think from a privacy standpoint for us as individuals. So as one of the leading authorities on this, is that a true statement? And where are we on security these days?
It's a great point because you have a couple of different technologies converging that are of concern. So you have the data collection side of everything. You have behavioral-based analytics based on data collection. You have data optimization, data aggregation, and ostensibly those could be good things, right? And so you could have data aggregated that helps find an individual cure for cancer. That's incredible. And you have to have data aggregation, data optimization, behavioral-based analytics, and artificial intelligence to help you get there. But on the flip side, if the data isn't collected in such a way that it focuses on your and my privacy, then other technologies converging on the scene, such as quantum computing, put those technologies at risk. And they put our data, our individual privacy elements, they put our data and us at risk. And so that's the conundrum we find ourselves in, is how do we enable technology in a way that it supports, enhances the human user story? And how do we implement technology in such a way that it doesn't actually impede or take away from the human user story? And so the concern is, and I'll just give you a very simplistic example. It used to be there was a huge language barrier in doing very sophisticated social engineering attempts. You had to have translation. You could tell by reading the email that it wasn't in a CEO's voice whose first language was considered to be American English versus the Queen's English, when we definitely speak different forms of English, right? And so,
I say.
yeah, exactly. And, colloquialisms, all the things that go into that human users are trained on. Well, now you can have any language as your first language and go to a generative AI tool and say, I need you to translate this into American English. In fact, write it in the tone of Matthew McConaughey, because I'm going to be targeting a Texas company who works with celebrities, and make it sound like it's coming from the CEO to the CFO, and then do another one. And so you can do all this at speed and at scale and launch these sophisticated attacks, which then, back to your point, Martin, puts us in more danger because it's more sophisticated. And that's on a simplistic level. That I'm not even talking about the ability to create malicious software at scale, tested against all the known security products that businesses use at scale, and then figure out what slips past through the defenses. Like, that's on a whole nother level.
To that point, I was reading a story about a gentleman who was woken up in the middle of the night by a phone call. And on the other end of the phone, he heard his screaming and crying elderly mother. And then a guy gets on the phone saying, basically, I've got your mother here. I'm going to kill her. unless you Venmo me $500. And the guy's, well, I can afford $500. That's easy. Sends the 500. The guy goes, I'm going to need another 500 more. All the while, the mother crying and screaming in the background sends the $500. Click, the call ends. In a panic, what does the guy do? He calls his mother's number to see if she's okay. And she's like, what are you doing calling me in the middle of the night? So if this is what we have to do, and if this is what's coming, and people are always that one step ahead of taking what's available and doing just horrendous stuff with it, what chance do we, the collective, we have to block it, stop it, get behind it, and find these, these bad actors that are doing this stuff?
Yeah, this is terrible. And a lot of people don't realize, like back in the landline phone days, remember how you could pay extra money to have your phone be registered as a private number?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They
Yeah, I
didn't know
remember
it was
that.
associated with you. And remember how then there was the do not call, so people couldn't call you, take me off your and like they bypassed all of that with the cell phone, right? Our cell phone numbers are sold all over the place, which is why I'm a huge fan of never giving out your real cell phone number, except for to a small group of people, right? Go to Google Voice, go to Talkatone, get a burner number, especially for people who are dating. Like, don't give out your real number, right? And then
That's
you
interesting.
can forward that to your real cell phone number. Virtual kidnapping, which is the scenario that you just played there, Ken, it's real. And they tug at our heartstrings. Of course, we love our family members. Of course, we love our friends. And of course, we would do anything for them. And we're in a panic and we would send money. And I don't kid myself. If I thought I heard my mother's phone, voice on the other end of the phone,
Absolutely.
I might react the same way. So what I tell people is you need to practice and rehearse this both at work and in your personal life. Have a passphrase that is not easily guessed by everybody else on the outside. And so when you're in that moment where somebody is saying to you, I need you to do something and I need you to do really quickly. This can happen at work too, right? I need you to wire transfer this money to this nonprofit that we made a deal with, or we're under an acquisition mode. We're acquiring a company. You need to wire this money, right? And then in our personal life, I've got your person. They're in danger unless you give me money. Or I've got, and you hear their voice, or they may even give you a video that looks like your loved one. Have that passphrase that is not easily guessed. I test my family on it all the time. My parents know it. My kids know it. My husband knows it. And I'll say, if somebody calls me, kidnappers, and says, I have so-and-so, and I hear your voice, I'm going to say, I'll send the money after you give me the passphrase. And then I'll say to the family, like out of the blue, what's the passphrase? If you want to be rescued, you got to give me the passphrase. And I try to make a game out of it. But you have to have that muscle memory. So that's my biggest piece of advice. And do the same thing in the workplace. So I always tell my employees, if you get a text message from me or even a voicemail from me saying, I need you to move this money right away, that's like a red flag. That is not actually me. And no one's ever going to get fired by picking up the phone, calling my number and saying, what is the passphrase? I'm not going to do what you asked me to do unless you give me the passphrase because I don't think it's you. And I said, most likely it's not me because that's not, I like to operate in person. My second favorite is video. My least favorite is like texting and leaving voicemail messages or emails. And then we actually have a game in our company where we post all the social engineering that comes into a channel so everybody can see the rude notes I get from employees saying, you need to change my payroll to route my check to this address and do it now. And I'm like, who would talk to the CEO? But, we post all this stuff. Or like I get emails to myself as the CEO saying, this is your CEO. I need you to do this right away. I'm like, wow, I'm really rude when I talk to myself. But anyways, so that passphrase, I think, can be a great way to outthink and outdesign the cyber criminals.
Well, Theresa, we
what
were
a great
warned
thing
by
for parents. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Mark. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, we were warned by all of your employees prior to this. We have a Slack channel set up, and they said, like, just be careful. And by the way, we all want raises, and make sure you deliver those.
Hey, by the way, how do you actually know this is me? I could be a deep fake video just interacting with you.
Well, you know what? We're enjoying the hell out of it, so it's really solid.
So they did a good job.
You know what's really wild is before we got on the phone, a hybrid of the scenario that you just described just took place to me. And our son contacted us. He works for a global consulting firm. And he just sent a note and said, right now at our firm, there are a series of deep fake phone calls coming out representing themselves from our company and representing my name and employee number and asking for verification of information. And this is a technology consulting firm, and they're a big one. And so just literally that hybrid of personal thing, he's sharing it with us. And by the way, our safe phrase is Ken is very handsome. We all know that in our
Please
our
feel free to
household.
use that, everyone.
But it's remarkable. It's hitting us now. So do me a favor. I don't know what your love of sci-fi and dystopian futures are. It was my diet as a kid and still is.
No,
But
here we
like
go.
we've seen so much of these type of things coming, right? Minority Report was probably the most famous, the Philip K. Dick book, and then Tom Cruise did the movie of it, which is very popular because it showed you a future where you would walk into an environment and all the digital assets around you would recognize you and then present ads specifically built for you. I know there was experimentation taking place in airports and other situations where you would walk up and through facial recognition, the signs would read who you were and then tell you, hey, this way to your gate and type of things like that. I don't know if it ever was implemented, but I don't feel like any of that is sci-fi anymore. And I'm wondering from someone with your perspective, what's next? What are we looking? What's going to come down the line?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. It's interesting. We actually made our kids watch Minority Report. And so do you think they actually fed him all those memories when, he's like in the little cryo thing? Like, do you think he
Yeah.
actually did commit? I don't know. Anyways, I don't know, spoiler alert. But we made the kids watch it because we wanted them to really understand. I'm raising 3 Gen Zs. We wanted them to understand the concept of how do you consciously be off the grid? How do you consciously do that? And how do you make those decisions? And what is the dystopian future if we don't honor being off the grid? And so I thought it was a really helpful movie for us to have a conversation about. And when I think about technology, again, I'm going to always go back to the human story. I've been a fan of always focusing on the human story. I didn't start off as a cybersecurity expert. I started off as a developer in banking at an incredible kind of innovative technology time in banking, right? And so mobile banking, online banking, web-enabled ATMs, and just like a really cool time to be in the financial services industry. And I always started with, how do we want the customer to feel? Like, what are we trying? There's the profitability side. That's table stakes. But then what differentiates us from other banks? And it's really, I worked at Barnett Bank, which is now part of Bank of America. And it was always about, how do we want people to feel about us as a company? And we want every experience, whether it's in person or technology supported or technology enabled as self-service, we want every person to walk away with a sense of place and a sense of purpose, and that Barnett Bank really cares about them. And so I've always been very focused on that human user story. And so if you fast forward to today, where technology is so much more advanced than it was back then, I go back to, stop talking about the technology and ask yourself, before the human started using the laptop today or this podcasting software, what were they doing in the minutes before? And when they're done using the technology to do the task at hand, what will they be doing next? And that's really, if we focus on those human user stories, we won't let technology run everything. Technology is supposed to work for us and work on our behalf and enhance our lives and improve our lives. Not technology is supposed to run everything and, keep us within some level of guardrails because it's all about surveillance and monitoring. So we have to continue, I think, to have these conversations. Every time technology leapfrogs to the next level of innovation, we have to revisit what are the right guardrails here? How much, how do you feel about self-service checkout? I thought to myself when it first came out, I was like, well, for companies that go all 100% in on self-service checkout with no human beings involved, what could go wrong? I don't
hate them
know.
all.
A lot, right? And technology is not foolproof. It is a great optimizer. It's a great enhancer, but it's not always perfect. And now you're seeing where some stores are like, you know what, I like self-checkout, but not the way I currently have it implemented. We need a little bit more humanity in the process, right?
Right.
Amen.
By the way, Theresa, what you have just done there is somewhere between third rail and man shakes fist at clouds, because Ken is doing everything he can to hold back on a rant on how much he hates self-checkout.
The wonderful world, the wonderful and convenient world of self-checkout. All right, I have to ask you this because any listener would ask about your career arc, working in financial services, and I don't know what's in between that, but then suddenly you are the chief information person at the White House. I mean, how did that happen?
I always say it was a God thing, honestly, because I did a PowerPoint presentation which I shared with my now husband when we were dating, and I showed him kind of like, if we're going to start dating, should we date? Because I don't know if our life goals are compatible. And he was like, you're 18. I just wanted to go out to dinner. I was like, no, I really want to go over, like, this is kind of the plan. And
I
we were really good
respect that,
friends.
Teresa. I love it.
Is it a God thing or a Microsoft Office thing? I'm trying to
I
figure this
don't
out.
know. That was, when Clippy was still around. But
I love Clippy. I miss Clippy.
Clippy. So I spent 16 years in the financial services industry, and what's interesting is I originally thought I would be going back to law school at some point, doing like large international finance deals, and then one day running for U.S. Senate. That was like on the PowerPoint.
Jeez.
You can validate this with my husband, Chris, right? So, but then I got these amazing, and I say these are God moments, opportunities where things just presented themselves in my path. So I got this opportunity to go get my master's in management information systems at UVA at the McIntyre School on a scholarship. And so that's not law school. And, I kind of took this left turn. Then my husband got orders. So once I finished graduate school, Chris got orders not for Washington, D.C., which is where I thought we were going to be going, or L.A. or Hawaii. Those were kind of my three things that I put in for. We ended up going to Mayport, Florida. So not really, again, career-wise, I thought, oh, what am I going to end up doing here? And I got this incredible opportunity at Barnett Bank, and they put a lot of faith and trust in me. They gave me a lot of cutting edge technology projects to work on. I'm just so grateful. I learned so much. I'm really good friends with many of my mentors from my time at Barnett Bank. And then, so interesting enough, fast forward, I've come back from maternity leave probably too early, but there was a merger and acquisition going on at Bank of America, and I felt a lot of pressure to come back to work sooner than I had originally planned. And after a really long day, I had phone messages, and the executive assistant said, I almost didn't return the call. She said, there's been a call from the White House, and you need to return that call.
Did they use the secret code? Did they use your secret code word?
Well,
Yeah,
and
Ken is
here's
handsome.
what's so funny about this is, I'm sleep deprived. I've got 2 kids at home, a newborn. I'm not sleeping well. I'm super tired, and just like in that whole rigmarole of a working mom and everything. And I looked at her and I said, the apple juice company or the clothing company? And she was like, no, silly. The one at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
That's
And
great.
I then looked at her because we had regulators in. So there was stuff going on with the acquisition, which is why there was the pressure on me to come back to work early. There was stuff going on with the acquired company that the regulators were not happy about, which we had nothing to do with that other than we acquired that company. And so I looked at her, my eyes got really big, and I'm like, are we in trouble? I'm like, why is the White House calling about an acquisition? And she goes, no, silly. They want to talk to you about a job. And I was like, oh, That is totally social engineering or a really bad sales call, like really bad. And she was like, well, I'm going to stand here because I promised them you were going to call back. And I was like, well, wait and see. I said, watch. And I was like, watch the master show these pranksters.
Oh, no.
I don't believe them. And so I call back and I'm completely cheeky on the phone. And so between Bridget, who works for me today, Bridget was on the recruiting team. She took a call. She's like laughing that I like think it's a total fraud. I'm like, I'm going to need to see. And you couldn't easily do a video conference with the White House at that point, right between the White House and the bank. There wasn't something set up. So I was like, you're going to have to fax me your driver's licenses so I can look you up. And between Bridget and who ended up being my boss, John, they were like cracking up because I was the only person who reacted that way. And they were like, you are the new litmus test for everybody that we talk to. So anyhow, fast forward, I get the opportunity to interview. I do get selected. My family and I talk about it. We pray about it. And we make the decision because it's not just a burden on the family. I'm going to be commuting every week. It was a big financial pay cut, and all of the expenses, because you're a political appointee, you have to pay for yourself. So I even paid for my own plane ticket to go to the job interview. And that's the way it should be, really. But I thought, you know what? We have men and women. My family's military and law enforcement, and we have men and women who go overseas who don't make a lot of money, and they do it because they love this country and they serve. And I thought, I've got so many men and women in my family who have served. This is my opportunity to serve. And so we just, figured out the financials and we just kind of like with faith, we just went for it. And really the White House is an incredible opportunity. It was an honor, such a blessing. I've met so many amazing people. I learned so much. It really shapes how I think about security today. And I'm just so grateful that people took a chance on me. I was the first female in that job. I had never been a political. I was like, I don't need, like, are you, it was so funny going through the job interview. They would say, like, do you have any questions? And so I'd ask a question. They'd say, you don't have a clearance to know that answer. And so after kind of several responses like that, where I wouldn't get, and they're like, do you have any more questions? I'm like, do you have any that you can answer? And they're like, probably not. And so I finally, my
like that. That's an awesome interview. We're just not going to answer any of your questions.
I didn't know how many people would be working for me. I didn't know the locations. I didn't know the technology. And I finally just said, how am I qualified to do this job? Like, I don't want to fail. And how do you know I'm qualified? And they just basically said, look, you've been on call 24/7 your whole career. You're in a heavily regulated environment that when things go wrong, everybody will notice. And you've had to do big, complex technology projects. And what you don't know about White House operations and your clearance, we can teach you. And I was like, okay, well, if you feel that my background has enough qualifications, I'm just going to have to trust. And so that's how I ended up there.
What a story. That's amazing.
It's a great story. So Nerd Boy here wants to take so you had this amazing exposure in politics. You had the amazing exposure into how legislation works and the thinking around like difficult technology issues. So recently you were speaking, well, I don't think it's recently, you do it all the time, about privacy and sort of our rights and like what is our data and what isn't our data. So, Ken and I have talked about this repeatedly, that it's been years that we've been living immersed in tech, where we're giving our credit card, we're giving our information online, all of this particular time. And, South Park did this like 13, 14, 15 years ago, this horrendously graphic funny show about like, if you don't read the terms of agreement and you just sign it, we all sign those things. What sort of hell are you submitting yourself to? And I wouldn't recommend anyone watch it, but they make an incredible point. And where are we on sort of privacy rights? The EU has put some really strong web rights in place, but like right now, all of our data is out there. It's available. And I think I'm getting kind of annoyed at how I can't control who's using my data. People are making money on my data. Why can't I be getting some benefit or selling my data as part of that? Where is the government, no matter the administration, on thinking around a privacy bill of rights?
Yeah, I love your question. And, I look at how swiftly the Hill moved to, they call it the TikTok ban, but really if you, again, back to like reading the actual legislation, it really isn't a TikTok ban. It's looking at companies that have ownership or undue influence and the ability to fast track banning them. And TikTok just happens to be first in line, unfortunately for them. But I look at how fast they moved, and I kind of have to be really brutally candid here. I'm pretty frustrated because there's other things that I believe should be sooner up on the line, right? So how we think about mental wellness and guns, for example, like that should be up in the line. Privacy Bill of Rights, I've been saying since before I even worked at the White House that we needed an individual privacy Bill of Rights in the United States where, to your point, Martin, you should be able to log in, just like somebody doing a background check on you can log in to whether they log into White Pages or Spokeo or to People or to all the other different kind of people search engines. And you should be able to log in and see all of these different aggregators of information have collected the following about you. You should be able to correct what's wrong because guess what? There's stuff in there that's wrong. It's not you, it's somebody else. Secondly, you should be able to say, yes, I'll allow you to monetize. And every time you monetize, I want a little something for me. And I want it, in gift cards or whatever it is. And then third, no, I'm not comfortable with you monetizing how hard I brake or how hard I hit the gas when the light turns green. No, I'm not comfortable with you monetizing that I'm doing searches on the internet and I just happen to still be logged into Instagram while I'm doing searches on the internet for an aging relative and I'm looking up their healthcare issues, but you're somehow appending it to my record. No, I'm not okay with you sharing that with people. And so we don't have that. And the closest thing that exists to that is a good step in the right direction, but in practice, it can be inelegant at best in practice, which is GDPR, which includes the right to be forgotten. The question is, like, if Ken and I were in an article together and I love my quote and Ken doesn't like his quote, and he, under the right to be forgotten, asks for the article to be erased, what happens to me if I like my quote? So, like, who gets to define and be the arbiter of the right to be forgotten in that particular instance? But I do believe that from a EU perspective, the EU and Canada have a lot going correctly for their citizens. And so there is a framework that we can look at and that we can leverage. And I would love to see companies step out and say, we believe in the human user story. And because we believe in it, here is our true privacy disclosure of what you can opt in and opt out of. Here's how we monetize your data. Here's, what we're going to do for you by you allowing us by opting in. So that transparency, I would love to see companies say, you know what, we're not going to wait for big bad government to tell us what to do and what not to do. We're actually going to differentiate ourselves in the customer experience by being privacy focused up front. And I always tell people too, like, for example, on browsers, if you look at privacy forward browsers versus browsers who let you opt into privacy. For example, I'm a big fan of Brave, the Brave privacy browser. It's free. They do ask for donations and you can browse the dark web if you want to using Brave. They will help you do that. You can turn it on so that it blocks all trackers and you can sit there and watch it. Start counting all the trackers it's blocking when you go to websites. And if you look at something like DuckDuckGo, they started off as a privacy forward search engine versus search engines who say, if you'd like to opt into some privacy features, and what they don't say is, and every time you update it, which we're going to tell you to update it, we're going to opt you back out of everything. So you got to opt back into everything that you want to be opted into. And I always say we should be opted into privacy and opt out where we want to monetize it for ourselves.
Please.
Yeah. I absolutely, you inadvertently or vertently, is vertently a word? word?
Let's make
But
it one.
It
let's
is
make
today.
it one. You verdantly. What I love what you just did is, I'm a big believer is what can we say that no one else can say? What's a first mover position? And all those brands that talk about like, we believe in you, the individual, we support you. Our whole ethos is about bettering you. My God, what is the company out there that will make that statement that then lets them be the first mover in their category or period that embodies that type of thinking? That's a really wonderful thought.
Yeah,
Probably
and
no one will actually do.
well, I mean, you have it, but they're not as widely adopted yet. So, for example, I'm a big fan of Brave. When I mention it, a
Brave's
lot of
great.
people are
Mhm.
like, "How do you spell that?" I'm like, "Brave." Like I'm a brave person. They're brave to have this business model, right? So they're just not as widely adopted and accepted. But Proton Mail. Oh my gosh, I've been an early adopter of Proton Mail. They do not sell your data. They encrypt everything. Is the user experience as seamless and elegant as some of the other mail platforms? No, but it depends on what's important to you, right? And so
Right.
I think one of the biggest takeaways I would ask people listening to this podcast is whether it's in your business life or in your personal life, it's trade-offs. And so there's a seamlessness and an elegant experience to just accepting what's given to you on your phone or your laptop when you get it, right? So there's something seamless and elegant somewhat, that it's not clunky and they all share data. And so that's one thing. But then what are you giving up for that? You may not have the best features and functions, and you may not have the best privacy. And so you just have to decide risk versus reward. It's a little clunky sometimes for me to use Proton Mail. And it's a little clunky to say to people, I really don't want to text with you on my phone about this. Would you like to take this over to Signal and let's have a conversation over there? So it's a little clunky, but I believe for privacy's sake, it's worth it. And so it's just that a risk versus reward trade-off. And I'm not going to judge anybody who's like, you know what, I just live on Google or I just live on Microsoft and that's where I want to live and it just makes my life easier. And I'm like, that's great. Just understand what you might be giving up in privacy if you don't take the time constantly to go check the settings and make sure you're opted into privacy.
Right.
Amen. Well, geez, this is utterly fascinating at about 1,000 different levels, Teresa, and we could probably do this for 4 hours, but we do need to be respectful of your time. But I would just ask as a final question, because I know it's something anybody would ask, besides looking into the family code word or phrase, which I think is a superb idea, or privacy forward browsers. Is there anything else people can do that's just super easy to protect themselves through their phone life, their laptop life, to make us all more secure?
Yeah, I mean, I always say you can have 5 minutes to be less unhackable, right? So in 5 minutes, first thing you want to do is update your operating system, all of your browsers, all of the different apps that you use. Do that on a regular basis. Pick Sunday morning while you're having coffee and reading the newspaper, whatever your routine is, where you can just kind of let it go and let it do its
Mhm.
thing. Having more than one email address. So maybe one email address that's dedicated to social media that's not tied to your bank account.
Ah,
Having those burner phone numbers and forwarding those to your real cell phone number. Looking at this privacy forward browsers and different types of platforms. And then the other thing to be thinking about is um, the misinformation and disinformation that's propagating on platforms. And I do happen to have a new edition of Manipulated coming out. So if people
fantastic.
are wondering around, like, how do I know if I'm encountering a deep fake audio or video of an elected official? How do I know if I'm encountering, it looks like a news organization and I'm super busy, so I don't have time, but now that headline stuck with me, what do I do with that? Or even more so, how do you help your loved ones, your friends, your colleagues who are falling prey to disinformation and misinformation?
Mhm.
How do you help them navigate away from what they now believe to be fact? How do you, with grace and space, help them along their journey to get back to facts? And so this updated edition very much gets into all the newest technologies, more importantly, unmasking the tradecraft of the manipulator schemes, and then basically giving people the tools to spot and stop deepfakes, alternate, kind of news sites pretending to be real news sites, and really know what to do to navigate this new normal.
Oh, I'm on it. Manipulated by Theresa Payton. Theresa, thank you so much.
I'm not
I
sure.
always enjoy watching your career, watching you on television. I'm in the gym. I look up on the TV, and there you are being interviewed by someone. See you on CBS Hunted. You're everywhere, and for very good reason. Everybody likes you, Theresa.
Aw, thanks, Ken. Except for
And
criminals.
Theresa,
Criminals don't
Except for
like me.
criminals, yeah.
well, there
Criminals
goes
like
half
me,
of our
apparently.
audience. There goes half of our audience. Teresa, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure. Great information. We will go ahead and put a number of the items that you mentioned in the show notes as well. Brave, DuckDuckGo, Signal. Signal's such a great app. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure, and keep up the good fight.
Oh, Martin and Ken, the time went by so fast. Thank you so much for having me on, and be safe out there.
We'll try. You're the greatest, Theresa. Thank you so much.